Hello and welcome to the John Ark Show. Today, we're going to interview AJ Benza. He's an actor, author, TV host, and gossip columnist. AJ has appeared in the film Rocky Balboa with Sylvester Stallone. He was a columnist for the New York Daily News. He was the host of a show called Mysteries and Scandals. He has written for Star Magazine and Radar Online, and he also is the host of one of the hottest podcasts anywhere right now, a podcast called Fame is a Bitch, which is routinely scooping more stories than many of the competitors out there. If telling the truth makes a writer a dangerous man, then AJ Benza is a very dangerous man. Before we begin, I want to encourage you to subscribe, like, comment, and follow us. Also, remember to click on the notification bell so you can be notified every time we upload a new episode. We have a lot of great celebrity interviews as well as fantastic news stories coming up. So we look forward to having you to watch along. Also, I'd like to tell you about a service called HollywoodIsCalling.com. It's a great service that allows you to purchase live phone calls with your favorite celebrities, so check them out. It's something you can buy for yourself or as a gift for someone you love. We have more than 100 celebrities to choose from. A live 15-second call is $19.95 and a 30-second call is $29.95. So try it, HollywoodIsCalling.com. Now, let's say hello to AJ Benza. Hi, AJ, and welcome to the John Ark Show. How are you today, sir?
I'm good, John. Nice to see you.
Thank you. So, AJ, you started your career as a columnist, and beginnings can be very hard for columnists because no one knows who they are at first. How did you go about developing your initial sources for the stories?
Well, I began actually as a sports writer for Newsday on Long Island, and then by happenstance, I fell into becoming a gossip columnist. It all happened quickly without any rhyme or reason, and I found myself at parties and at premieres and in the rooms of all the celebrities I saw on television and movie theaters, and I fell in love with the gig. And I think I began to distinguish myself as a columnist for the New York Daily News because, frankly, I was very different than most other columnists. Most gossip columnists were women or English people, Brits, gay men. There were not many straight American men running around wanting to write the latest in Hollywood gossip. And I was more of a snazzy dresser. I had a street guy appeal, and it all worked for me. I didn't have a suit on. I didn't carry a notepad and a pen. I just blended in with people at nightclubs and such, and I began to get a lot of information, and the rest is history.
Do you remember what your first big story was?
There were so many, but the biggest story was the fact that my column broke the Michael Jackson molestation story. Back when nobody was speaking about that, we were privy to the name of the young boy that he was palling around with and going to Euro Disney with, and we printed the kid's name in the paper. This had to be 92, 93 maybe, and it went bananas. Everybody started writing about what we wrote about. And then the dam opened up and Michael Jackson was never the same. He was always watched and followed, and God knows what happened to him in the end. But our column was the first to break that story. And it was actually interesting because we went ahead and printed the kid's name. He was only 13. We weren't suggesting there was any kind of sex involved. We just thought it was curious. He had a young friend with him. But of course, it all turned into what it turned into. So that was certainly the biggest story. But back when I was a columnist, you have to understand, it felt like every 2 weeks there was a huge story. If it wasn't the Joey Buttafuoco, Amy Fisher story, it was the Menendez brothers, it was Tanya Harding, it was the O.J. Simpson trial I was on in California, in New York. I went everywhere with that. It seemed that the marriage of tabloid television and gossip just exploded in the 90s when I was at the helm, and it really helped propel my career.
Yeah, it was really ahead of its time. Your format and your style was very ahead of its time. How often would a celebrity or their press person try and bribe you into not writing a story that might hurt their client? Did that happen?
It happens. The Daily News was never a publication that would accept money. We couldn't take tips. We didn't pay for tips, I should say. So everything we got because of hard work or because of people who snitched on people, and that happens all the time. But yeah, there were plenty of times where a publicist of a big celebrity would call. I got calls from big time celebrities who needed my help, and in that respect, some friendships were born. Where a person, let's say a Sylvester Stallone, didn't like what was about to come out in the tabloids, and could I do anything about it in my column to soften the blow? And I did. I did those things quite a bit for a number of guys. Mel Gibson was someone that comes to mind. Mel Gibson ran around. Everybody thought in the 90s he was the biggest star in Hollywood. He was married with 6 kids, and he was the picture of the perfect father. But meanwhile, Mel was running around New York with all sorts of girls. Unfortunately, one of the girls he ran with was one of my girls. And when I found that out, he knew he was busted. And then came all the promises. So could you please not write it? I'll put you in this movie. I'll give you this. I'll give you that. And I said, I can't do that, Mel. I've got to say, there are pictures of you leaving a hotel with a girl. I can say she's somebody I date to soften it, but I can't say you weren't there. And that's what I did. But the public understood the picture. That said 1,000 words.
Now, did you ever come across stories that you thought were too dangerous to publish?
Well, there were a number of stories. I was never scared to publish anything. No, but there was during the 90s when Mayor Rudolph Giuliani was a big shot in New York. Everybody knew he was cheating on his wife. Everybody knew he was having an affair with his spokesperson, Christine Latagano. Nobody would write it because every publication was petrified what it would mean to the newspaper or website or magazine. So no one wrote it. When Giuliani started to lose his power, then everybody wrote about it. It's a lot like what happened to Harvey Weinstein. Harvey was so ingratiated with columnists and newspaper people and TV people that a lot of things that he did went unwritten. I can't say I knew about rape, but I knew his bullying tactics and such. So a lot of people turned their cheek and didn't write about Harvey. And then, of course, when the dam breaks, everybody's got a million stories. So, yeah, that happens quite often. But I personally was never too afraid to write something. I had all sorts of people come at me, Church of Scientology, Nation of Islam. Anybody with power came after me, but they were all talk. Nothing happened.
Did anybody ever threaten your life literally?
Yeah, Louis Farrakhan's people did. The Church of Scientology did. And I would respond by telling them what corner of Manhattan I'd be at what time, and they can come get me and take me out whenever they want. No one shows up. It's a scare tactic, and if you hold your ground, they typically go away.
So I'm going to mention some famous celebrity murder cases, and I'd like to I'd like you to give me your thoughts on each celebrity and what you thought about how that case went.
Sure.
So on one of your podcasts, I heard you talk about what really happened in the OJ murder case, and it was stunning. Now, I've tracked that case from start to finish, but the facts that you disclosed on your own podcast were things that nobody else has ever disclosed. Can you talk about that a little bit?
I think you're referring to the drug deal that would possibly have gone down.
Yes.
Apparently, it was no secret that Nicole Simpson and Kris Jenner and all the girls that hung around back then liked to do cocaine. It was kind of wide out in the open. Faye Resnick was another one who I got to know very well. All the people in that trial I got to know very well, and they all began to tell me everything. But it wasn't until I met some particular people who said, Nicole was very behind in paying cocaine debt in the tens of thousands of dollars. It was nothing for them to float that kind of money, especially since they knew who OJ was. And when the payment wasn't coming fast enough, and then when it was denied, she was warned that somebody was going to come and take care of it. Now, one theory is that person came to meet OJ and said, tonight we take care of that bill. And there was nothing OJ could do about it. He thought maybe she'd get roughed up, and he was standing by to watch it. That's how this theory goes. Of course, things got out of hand. Nicole was killed. And while that was happening, Ronald Goldman happens to show up. And of course, he gets killed as well. Now, I've seen those pictures. I've seen them in color. They're brutal. The way Nicole looks is just, you'll never get it out of your mind. But Ronald Goldman was a tough kid. He was not small. He was a strong enough guy. And it makes you wonder how anybody could have walked away from that with no wounds on their hands or faces. OJ was completely clean. Ronald Goldman put up a fight. Who was there to fend off that fight? It wasn't OJ, because you would see bruises and marks on him. So the theory is that this particular tough guy who left town immediately and was flown right back to Miami was the culprit. But that's not to say OJ didn't jump in when things got haywire. But I think that theory holds weight because like I said, Ron Goldman put up the fight of his life. Everybody said that in the reports. And you just can't have a knife fight, any kind of fist fight like that, without having visible marks. And as we know, OJ was out working the next day and no one saw a thing except for a little cut on his finger. That's not what a street fight usually looks like.
Right. Do you think that maybe because OJ was upset that she was seeing Goldman, that he decided to willfully turn a blind eye for that night and let her take a beating? Did you think that was the
Yeah, I think that's a possibility, because it's not only Ron Goldman. Nicole was very openly seeing OJ's buddy Marcus Allen, the famous running back. OJ had seen Marcus Allen driving OJ's Mercedes that Nicole had gained possession of, and it bothered OJ that his buddy, USC guy, would be having sex with his wife and driving his car. And of course, that night at the recital for their daughter, OJ had been turned down on a date with the Playboy playmate I know named Tracy Adele. I'd sat and interviewed her a couple of times. I'd been out with Paula Barbieri, OJ's girlfriend. She went to Las Vegas with Michael Bolton that night. OJ's coked up. He goes to the recital. There's no chair for him. Yeah, I think at that point, anything could have happened, because his level of anger was way, way beyond what you'd imagine, especially when there's drugs involved.
Now, you were just a child when this next celebrity murder took place, but because it involves what I think was probably one of the 5 most beautiful women I have ever seen, I'm going to ask you about it.
Sure.
Actress Sharon Tate, who was married to Roman Polanski and who was killed by the Manson family. Now, I know this is before your time as a reporter, but what are your thoughts about that situation?
Well, the sad thing is, not only was she, I think, one of the most beautiful actresses of ever, the sad thing is that all happened basically because Charles Manson couldn't get his music played or get his music listened to by, what's his name, when the Beach Boys. And the house he went to teach this guy a lesson, that Beach Boy no longer lived there. The person who was listening to Charles Manson's music and said it's not good enough, he'd moved from that house. So Manson's people show up at that house completely killing the wrong people. They didn't go there to kill those people. When they got there, they realized where they were. But it's a total sin that had to happen. I love that Quentin Tarantino made the movie. If you haven't seen it, spoiler alert, but Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, he goes back and retraces that night and kind of changes the course of history. It's a brilliant movie. But yeah, that was awful. I know people who should have been there. I was very good friends with the late producer, Robert Evans. I used to live with him in Hollywood when I came out here for a time, and he was supposed to be there that night. There are a lot of people that just missed out getting slaughtered for, just simple reasons of having a stomach ache or missing, getting a cab too late, all different reasons. But it would have been even a bigger party and more deaths if things had happened the right way.
The next celebrity murder involves another stunning actress named Dorothy Stratton. Did you ever meet her? And what are your thoughts about that murder?
She was my favorite playmate. She used to be on my wall. In 1980, I was a senior in high school, and I had a weight room in my house, and I'd put her centerfold on the wall. And I never dreamed in my life that I'd ever be able to meet Hugh Hefner, visit the mansion, any of those people. And then, of course, by the time I'm 35 or so, I'm writing for Playboy. I'm meeting Hugh Hefner. I'm invited to the mansion. And one night I met Dorothy Stratton's sister. And it was very odd. I mean, first of all, that whole murder is the equivalent of what so many women in this town face. They have boyfriends who can't put up with other men looking at them a certain way. And women come out here and the boyfriend they leave back home gets very jealous. That's exactly what happened to her and Paul Snider. But what's really interesting is, Dorothy was making a movie with Peter Bogdanovich, and he fell head over heels for her. Hugh Hefner was head over heels as well. But Bogdanovich wins that war, and a very strange thing happened. He was at the top of his game directing back then. And after that murder, he went and lived with Dorothy's mother and young sister.
Mm-hmm.
And when her sister was about 17, he began to date her. He even suggested she get breast implants to look more like her deceased sister. And his career never rebounded. Bogdanovich turns up here and there, but his directing career never went anywhere after that. And to this day, he lives about 1.5 miles away from me with that sister and the mother, who is very elderly. And they take care of each other. It's a very strange relationship, but not many people know about the aftermath of that murder, what that did to people like Peter Bogdanovich. But it is creepy. The sister, Dorothy's sister, I forget her first name now, was very nice to me, liked my television shows, and I've just found it so eerie that she introduced me to Peter as her boyfriend, and I thought, what the hell is going on in this town?
What was your impression of Peter? Did you think he was a straightforward guy, or did you get the sense this was a creep?
He was very down, and he was so down. I could barely understand what he was saying. We sat on a lawn chair and we talked about the murder, how much he loved her and how much he loves her sister. It was very strange. It's the kind of conversation you want to walk away from. I wasn't even a columnist at this point. I was just an interested party. So I had my television show, Mysteries and Scandals, on the E! channel. So I guess they felt a little bit of a confessional mood. But no, he didn't come across as gross. It just came across as a real sad sack. And he still appears that way when he turns up on shows here and there.
Yeah. So next we have the murder of actress Lana Clarkson. Now, record producer Phil Spector was sentenced to 19 years for that murder. Did you ever meet her or him? And what are your thoughts about that case?
Well, it's funny. Of course, I met him. You can't help but meet him in this town. He was always out late, drinking, carousing. But Lana was my first girlfriend when I came to Los Angeles in 97. She was the first girl I would meet at the airport. And she took me around town. She was very, very popular in town. She had dated a lot of important men. Everybody knew Lana Clarkson. 6 foot, beautiful blonde. This is the kind of girl who could do comedy, could ride a horse and shoot an arrow from a bow in an action movie. She had it all. And I dated her for a bit, and then it ended. And then right before she died, she was sending out emails to people because she ended up becoming a hostess at the House of Blues. That's a very rough break for a beautiful girl who was once in movies and TV shows to then have to seat the people that used to look at you on television. It's very rough. And when you're 41 in Hollywood and you're not working, it doesn't look good. So she had sent emails out to friends about needing some outfits to go to work, some really nice clothes. And I didn't sense that was a really positive letter. And I worried about her. And I was at a restaurant and I saw the ticker come across saying actress Lana Clarkson shot dead. Right away, I thought he did it because he's been known to wave guns at people. The cops came after me. The detectives wanted to talk to me because I knew them both. And I said, I'm on Lana's side. You're not going to get me to talk about it. Phil's side came for me. Now that I've lived longer, I think that Lana had a hand in that herself. I think Lana went and got the gun from his dresser and pulled the trigger herself. I think with her knowing that her career was just about over, at 41 years old, to be a faded beauty in this town, the chances of coming back are real tough. And I think she wanted to live on in like she is right now. All these years later, we're still talking about it. I think that was her way of always living on. And there's a really eerie thing that went on in his car that night when Phil Spector took her home from the House of Blues. On his television set in the car, he was playing an old black and white movie that was very similar to their lives. An older producer is trying to get a young starlet, and I forget the name of the black and white. It's a brilliant old movie, but Lana was a big film buff, and I don't think that was lost on her. And I think all of that combined with They took a couple of Vicodin. They were drinking. It was very, very early in the morning. They had had sex. Maybe she felt filthy about that. But I think she pulled the trigger in the end because she didn't want to be around that. That's my most strong feeling about that after all these years have passed.
Did they find her fingerprints on the gun?
Everything was wiped. Everything was wiped.
Really?
Spector wiped it because he was handling it. It's always been in his drawer. He had guns everywhere. There were no fingerprints, but there was no actual, the amount of blowback of red blood that would have been on his white jacket would have been a lot. And there was not a lot of blood on him. And the way the spray went, it could have been either way. But knowing the two people, everybody would assume Phil did it. He's crazy. But I remember what it was like to lose everything in this town, to not have money, and to think that you're done. And it's one thing for a man. It's another thing for a beautiful woman to think everything's over. And Lana was very vain. And I think that she may have thought, this is it. I got to get out of here.
Yeah, that surprises me because somebody like Lana, maybe she couldn't find another celebrity to marry, but she could always, it seems to me, she could always have found another doctor or a lawyer or
I agree. I agree. But she still had dreams of performing. And the stuff that I saw her trying to push, a comedy show, it didn't land. It wasn't going to get her propelled back into the limelight. That's the way I felt. But you're right. Most of these girls, they get to a certain age, they stop with the celebrities and they find a doctor or a businessman who's content to have a beauty, and they get their money. And look, Phil Spector might have offered her a job for $100,000 to be his assistant. He might have said, come back to the house and I'll play you some old Yoko Ono, John Lennon music that no one's ever heard. She loved music. But something weird happened that night after they had sex. And it could have been a lot of regret, a lot of sadness. Drugs can do that to people. That can heighten your feelings. And then who knows?
So the next case involves Robert Blake, who plays Beretta. Now, he's been out of the picture for a long time. But A, what do you think of that murder case? And B, have you seen a video on YouTube of him being thrown out of a celebrity autograph convention? It's amazing.
No.
So the next time you're bored, check it out.
Yeah.
Well, what do you think of that whole murder scenario?
Look, I know the restaurant. I can walk to the restaurant. It's not even a half a mile from me. At Vitello's, used to eat there a lot. Blake was a very strange character, a tough guy who always wanted to stay tough, even though he was old and very small. He had that gang of friends around him that were lawbreakers who did little odd jobs for him. He was never going to get a big shot on TV again. And he happened to go out one night and impregnate this woman in the backseat of his car or his truck or her truck. It was like a quickie. And she ends up wanting to carry Robert Blake's baby, thinking it's going to be some windfall of money. And it clearly wasn't going to be. And it's a shame because there's a little girl involved. And I know he loved the little girl in the long run, but he got caught up in a bad situation with a woman who was strictly a con man for many years, with a lot of old men sending naked pictures she said she would send them naked pictures of herself for money. She would say things to them in letters to extort money from lonely old men. She was a disaster waiting to happen. And the night Robert Blake wanted a quickie with her was, for all intents and purposes, the end of his life. I mean, he's still alive, but there's no point. He's got nothing.
So I'm always intrigued by those moments in people's lives when they meet someone else and that meeting changes both people's lives. Now, you met actor Mickey Rourke when he was at the height of his career. How did that friendship affect your life?
I loved Mickey Rourke's acting. I was a huge fan. I met him. We both got thrown out of a party. We were both trying to get into Vogue magazine's 100th birthday party at the Museum of Natural History. I couldn't get in. I was a nobody. I had just gotten in the business. Nobody knew me. He was in trouble because his model girlfriend, Carrie Otis, said he was stalking her. So I met Mickey as we were both getting thrown out of a party at the Museum of Natural History in New York for Vogue magazine. And I was a nobody. I just gotten my start. He was coming off some of his bigger movies. I was a huge fan. And we just made eye contact. And it's just no rhyme or reason. He's the one guy I would have loved to meet. And he looks at me and says, "What happened to you?" I said, I got thrown out. He says, "Come in my car. We'll go downtown. We're going to go to a nightclub and the whole party's going to be there in 2 hours." And we went downtown and everybody ended up showing up at this little nightclub called Rex. All the supermodels were there, a lot of big time actors. And I saw a lot of stuff that night that opened my eyes to what New York nightlife and celebrity is about. A lot of girls kissing girls, a lot of men doing things to girls. I mean, I just drugs out in the open. So I called my then friend, Linda Stacy, who had a gossip column at Newsday. And I said, you can't believe what I saw tonight. And she said, well, give me a story and I'll give you $50. And then she loved it so much. She said, why don't you just keep going out for me and I'll bring you in once or twice a week. And that's how my career began. And Mickey and I stayed friendly. And I was with him through many memorable nights when his career started to fade, when he wanted to kill himself, when we were out with Tupac Shakur one night and Mickey ordered his driver to stop the car and he laid down in the middle of Fifth Avenue waiting to get hit by a car. I mean, he clearly wasn't straight. He had a lot of drugs in his system, but I met him at the top of his game, so to speak. And then on the way down, it was pretty sad. I always think he's great. I always think he's a great actor. I love the guy personally, but there's a lot of drama. But that changed my life. That sent me in a whole different direction.
Yeah, you and Mickey were meeting an awful lot of actresses and models. Was that a function of celebrity? Was that a function of charm? Was that a function of all the above?
Mickey's got everything. Mickey's very charming. He was a huge celebrity. I like to think that I had charm because I wasn't a celebrity quite yet. People started to know my name, but I started to get people's respect, and they started to let me hang around. A lot of gossip columnists or reporters will stay out for a while. In order to do my job right, I had to stay out till 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning, and I had to outlast some of these people. I had to be there when they got tipsy, get myself in the booth in the corner when nobody else was there so they could be quiet and talk to me and confess things or what have you. And then you have to gain the respect because you can't print everything they say. And once they saw I was that kind of guy, I was allowed entree into a lot more places. And that's where Bob Evans comes into play in Los Angeles when I moved here in 97. And I would be with him and Jack Nicholson and Warren Beatty and you name it. I was around them all, and they were just very open around me. So I found myself in a great position. But then it got very difficult because I didn't want to tell stories on people that I admired. I didn't want. I was glad to be out of gossip in the late 90s because I didn't want to do that to people anymore. I was having too much fun swimming in their pools, dating them, running around with them. It just my priorities changed. And I was doing television then, so I didn't have to spy on them and listen in on their conversations. I was a television personality now. So that helped a lot too.
I have heard some unbelievable stories about the parties that used to take place at Nicholson's, at Beatty, at Evans' house. Without getting yourself into trouble, can you give us a hint of what was going on up there?
Bob Evans threw the greatest parties. They call him, he's like Jay Gatsby in that respect. The whole business, the whole industry comes to his place. He just passed a year ago. His stuff was auctioned off last weekend. Very sad for me to see things that I sat on and laid on get auctioned off, but that's the way it goes in this town. But he would have tremendous parties. Like I said before, drugs were always available in those parties, especially guys like Nicholson. Warren Beatty wasn't big with that, but Bob was, and Jack was, and a lot of younger actors who came by were. And it was widely available. There were very, very beautiful women there. This is during the Heidi Fleiss days, so her girls were always around. I never needed to do that. I had my own luck without having to pay for it. But many of these celebrities found it better to pay for sex so that the girl would leave and not have to give them a headache afterward with some kind of problem. So I began to see guys like Charlie Sheen hang out around me, major people that have all become these controversial figures in our business. I've seen the great side of them, and then I've seen an awful side of them where, I've been out with Robert Downey when he's a terrific guy. Then I remember when he fell asleep in someone else's bed in Culver City because he was high on crack and didn't know where he lived. I don't want to say this town will do that to you, but for some reason, it seems to really wreck a lot of people's heads, the ups and downs of fame. And now you look at Robert Downey and guys that were at parties that could barely speak a line without throwing up. And now what is he worth? $700 million as Iron Man. I mean, it's unbelievable the ups and downs these guys have. But These are people who are really having a good time in the 90s. Now they've got to have a team of people around them so they don't drink or get tempted by drugs. They've got the best chefs to give them the most perfect meals. They've got nutritionists. They've got trainers. I've seen them on the ups and the downs, and it's fascinating. It'll always be fascinating to me how much can change on a dime in this town.
Do you think Downey was really turned around by his wife, or is this just providence or fate getting him back on track?
Who'd you say?
Robert Downey.
Oh, I think it was more than her, but she had a big hand in it. A lot of people praise her. I don't know her well, but a lot of people give her a lot of praise. But there were so many people put in front of him, a team of people to keep him on the straight and narrow. So I wouldn't say it's only her, but Deborah definitely was the one to really, she could have junked him and walked away. Like you say, there's plenty of other men in this town. Downey's very charming, very handsome, but when he was a wreck, he was a wreck. So she is the person that began it all, but there's a tremendous team still around him to this day.
Mm. So back in the day, you and Mickey used to hit the nightclubs in New York a lot. And people have no idea what the nightlife and the social life back then was compared to today. Now people will sit on Tinder for 3 hours and swipe to the right. They think that's the social world. They have no idea what Studio 54 was like.
Oh God!
Did you ever attend? And if so, tell us a little bit.
I was at the tail end of Studio 54, but to me, I think a lot of people will agree, nothing will top Studio 54. But that was just complete decadence, sex, drugs, rock and roll, out in the open, with the biggest stars in the world and dignitaries from different countries. But now in the 90s, it exploded in New York. A lot of places in Soho, Spy Bar, Bowery Bar, Boom. A lot of places in Midtown, the Palladium, Limelight. There were nightclubs everywhere, and then no one had a phone with a camera on it. You had to talk to people. You couldn't text anybody. If you liked a girl, you went up to her and got her number on a napkin, or you tried to memorize it in your head. But it forced you to just be a human being and be social. And now with social media, I've gone out not too long ago with a couple of younger people, and we're in the middle of before COVID, a nice place with a lot of beautiful people around, and they're on their phones, not even looking up around the room, or they're texting someone across the room and not even talking to them. It's even happened in my house where there's 4 of us in the room, and we'll send a text to each other rather than get up in the other room to say something. I hate it, but there's something about it I like, because I don't like to pick up the phone a lot. But it's a lost art to talk to people you need to meet, especially when you're a reporter. You had to go up and talk to someone, as uncomfortable as it made you. There were no texts to press and then pray. You had to go up there and show your face. It made you a better person.
Yeah, there's something inherently important about face-to-face.
Yeah.
So at some point, you start working for E! Entertainment. How did appearing on a national show change your life?
Well, the money, of course, was something that didn't happen right away. I actually took a pay cut to go from the Daily News to California, but I knew there was a big opportunity. It changed because, when you're a writer in New York, I had a lot of power. People took my calls. They were fearful of me, what have you. I got a lot of girlfriends out of it, you name it. But when you have a television show and people see you in their rooms every night, it's a very intimate thing, and it just explodes. I mean, that's when I thought I was kind of, okay, I got some fame. Once you have big celebrities coming up to you and shouting your tagline from your show, "Fame ain't a bitch," on airplanes and restaurants, and people you've admired, Oscar winners, coming to you in a bathroom to tell you they watch you. Sharon Stone used to come by. Milton Berle shook my hand and said, "You talk about all my friends that are gone. I never miss your show." Robert Stack sent me a picture when he was hosting Unsolved Mysteries and said, "You do me better than I do me." And I still have that on my wall.
By the way, what was your impression of Sharon Stone?
Well, I knew her very well. She's a movie star like no other. When she walked in a room, I covered the Oscars for a few years, and when you're in that room, you see all the beautiful people. But there's something about Sharon Stone when she walked in. She could have been wearing the white T-shirt or some elaborate gown. Everybody stops. She just has it. That's it. Raquel Welch. I've been out with her. My buddy was married to her. Another person who just has star quality. I hate to even put Kim Kardashian in the same light because there's no discernible talent there, but she's got it. Nicole Kidman, I've been with her at a table. All these people, the thing about them that I think is fascinating, you think you know who they are, then you sit across from them, and the secret is they all make you feel like you have a shot with them. They have this ability to make you think, you know what, you might take me home tonight. And you know you're not. But they're so good at that you leave the table kind of floating on air. And that's the appeal they have, and that's why they're movie stars. And it never goes away.
So later on, you went to host. You went on to host Mysteries and Scandals, which I thought, once again, was years ahead of its time. What was
Great
that experience like?
Yeah. Well, that was the greatest. I loved it. I didn't know how great it was when I first got the job. I didn't know much about. I knew a lot about Hollywood, but there were some people we covered that I wasn't sure who was Albert Decker, who was Alan Azimova. There were some names I had no idea about. But once you went into the biographies of these people and found out about their scandalous lives and deaths, my God, it was fascinating for me, and it was a great position for me to be in because everybody in this town came here to be famous. Everybody in this town can remember the Clark Gables and the Cary Grants and all the famous actresses who came before them. So we're always intrigued by their deaths and their scandalous lives. So my show, it still should be on now. I mean, it's an evergreen show. People's lives are always thrown into some crazy scandal. We see it every week in this town. And at the time when it happened, E was just becoming an international channel. So my show was on in Europe as well, and South America. And when I traveled to Italy and Paris, people knew who I was. And that's a whole different type of fame than just people. I used to think people reading my column in the subway was really cool. And then when people shout your name in Paris or Rome, it's just mind-boggling. Those were the most fun days of my life out here. And there's been no job since Mysteries and Scandals that I could say I enjoyed as much. That was great because we were all learning television too. I was with a bunch of young kids who were in their early to mid 20s who were learning how to produce and direct, and everybody was learning. I was 35 or so, and I just showed up and spoke into the camera. But man, I had a ball. To be a TV star in LA in my age, I had a ball.
So, like a lot of other guys, I was a huge Sylvester Stallone fan going way back, and I got to meet him years later at a fundraiser. Every guy in America who was a Rocky fan secretly fantasized about being in a Stallone movie, but you actually did it. You appeared in Stallone in a movie called Rocky Balboa. Right. How did you pull that off?
I didn't pull it off. I got to tell you, I met Sly 10 years before that in Miami. It was a nice meeting. He was a nice guy. I was at his house and found him very charming. I was a huge fan forever. I'm an Italian kid, so of course I love Rocky. And I just got home from a movie. I saw a matinee, and I said to my wife, I got to get out and do more movies. I got to audition more. And I swear to God, my phone rang, and my manager said, hey, they want you to read for Rocky 6 tomorrow. And I said, there's another Rocky coming out? He said, apparently there is, and they want you to read for it. Okay. So he sent me the sides, and it was about playing like a sleazy East Coast manager type guy, which I could do. I read. They liked it. The next day they said, Sly would like you to come in and talk about the role. And I went to see him, and he said, how you doing? You know, you did really good, and you want to have fun together. I didn't know he was giving me the part. He was playing golf in his office. And he said, you want to have fun together? I thought maybe he wanted me to hit the golf ball. I don't know. And he said, no, you could do this movie. You could do this easy. So let's do this. And I'll tell you, it was the best. It was the most fun I've ever had to be close to him for 4 weeks, to be in Las Vegas for the actual fight scene for 2 weeks. That was just, to be in the ring with Sylvester Stallone as Rocky Balboa just didn't feel real to me. I've seen all the movies, you know, Burgess Meredith is in there, Talia Shire, Burt Young. It didn't make sense that I'd be in that ring. So that blew my mind. And 2 weeks there, 2 weeks in LA, and then a couple of days in Philadelphia, where he really is a god. And we filmed the scene in the restaurant where I invited him to fight my guy. And that was a trip because everybody in Philly was outside that window just wanting a glimpse of him. He is the Pied Piper out there.
Yeah.
Never, nothing like it again. I can't tell you what that meant for an Italian kid to be in Rocky Balboa. Nothing comes close.
You know, Stallone also hired Mickey Rourke for, I think, one or two of his movies. And the thing about Mickey that always surprises me, and I don't know why it does surprise me because I've sort of grown used to it, but he's always more talented than almost anybody else in the movies he appears in. He's really surprising good.
He's great.
Good.
He's great, but he's his own worst enemy though. When Nicole, he had parts. Harvey Weinstein was going to give him a big role in Pulp Fiction, and Mickey wanted more money, and they were telling him, "You don't understand. This is going to be big for your career." He was going to get the Bruce Willis role, but he didn't. They didn't match the money he wanted, and he said, "F you." They went to him again. Tarantino did another movie, Grindhouse, and Mickey wanted $1 million. They said, "You're going to get $500,000, Mickey, but your career is going to rebound. You're going to be great." And he just cursed him out and said, "I get $1 million and F you." And he made fun of Harvey being Jewish, just like annihilates himself. He had the job. So that happens to him a lot. And until he stops that, and he never will, it's always going to be that way. But he clearly is such a great actor. And I often say if he had died after Body Heat, Hope at Greenwich Village, and I think Angel Heart, he would have been like James Dean, because those three movies were just phenomenal. Everybody looked at him and they couldn't believe how gorgeous and how talented he was.
Now, are you and Mickey still friends? Is he still boxing these days?
He works out. He never stops working out. He's in incredible shape. He always is. Whenever you see him, he's shredded. His arms are shredded. He's never got a belly. He's got a physique. And I'm talking late 60s. I haven't hung out with him in a while, but he's always here in Beverly Hills having lunch at my buddy's pizza place and just, shooting the crap with guys in the corner. He's had a troubled life. It all stemmed from his childhood, his stepfather who beat him badly. And, often a lot of our junk happens when we're kids. And for Mickey, it all began there. But he is his own worst enemy. When he was up for the Oscar for The Wrestler, I thought, okay, he's got to win. Except he was up against Robert Downey Jr. And, there's no way Robert Downey was going to win with the redemption of his career and everything. And even Robert Downey, when he won, said, "Mickey, this is for you." Because we all love him. We all want to see him succeed. He still might pull a role out of his head that just somebody writes for him perfectly. He can nail it at 75 years old. You never know.
Yeah. I heard you on a podcast talking about the difficult times you in your career when the big jobs dried up and you ended up working in retail. Now, there are 40 million Americans out there looking for work, desperate financially because of recent circumstances. What advice, and by the way, you turned things around. You really did, which is no small feat. What advice do you give to a lot of the people out there who are really struggling? What did you do to turn things around?
Honestly, my problem initially was I waited too long. I thought, well, I'm going to get a call any day now. I'd written the proposal for my second book, and I thought I was going to get a call and get a big advance and everything would be fine. So I was sitting on my ass and not doing enough. And my brother-in-law, who's like my father, he's been with me since I'm 5 years old. He really read me the riot act and said, "You got to get off your butt and work. You got to go just find money. You got to make money. I don't care how you do it, where you do it." I was living with my sister and her husband at that point because I lost everything in California. I went back to Long Island to live in my childhood home. So it was really humbling. So I waited, and then finally I bit the bullet, swallowed my pride, and I went and got a retail job. And I also drove a cab because you really don't get turned down for a cab job. If you know how to drive, you can do it. It's boring. It's hard work. But the only advice I could give, the way that helped me was, it humbled me. And I began to formulate the book in my mind of 74 and Sunny, my second book, as I was driving the cab. so that gave me hope that I had something to work for, not just a 12-hour driving a cab shift or 8-hour day selling TVs. So I was able to turn it around that way and then get my book proposal, get my advance, and come back to LA and turn things around. But for the people who lost their job now because of COVID and they don't have a place to turn, my heart breaks for them, because if I didn't have my podcast, I'd be in the same boat. I'd have to be trying to find a job someplace. Who knows if it'd be a phone job or a retail job? I don't know where it would be. It wouldn't be enough money to support my family with the money I'm used to making. It would put me way down at the bottom again, because the discernible skills I have, no one's going to hire me at a newspaper anymore. Newspapers are dead now anyhow.
Mhm.
I'm a conservative. I'm a Trump supporter. I'm very loud and proud about that. That doesn't go big out here in California. So the only thing I could do is do my podcast and really break my butt to make it good and make it profitable. But for the folks who can't find work now with COVID, I don't know. You know what? I hate to say it. When it comes to feeding your kids, you'll do anything. And I know a lot of people have done things like that. So my heart breaks. But you just got to hope, cling on to something that has some hope attached to it. In my case, it was the book. And I'm lucky to have had that. Otherwise, I don't know what I would. I remember days when I'd walk a mile to get a cup of coffee and get the newspaper. And I remember, God forgive me for saying this, that, you know what? Maybe if I walk a little closer to the street and a car clips me in the shoulder and spins me around, like that's how deranged you get. Like maybe you're better off not being around. Of course, that's not the answer, but it plays with you, especially a man with a family. It's very humbling. You just got to have hope. I hate to be so predictable, but you've got to pray that we get through this nonsense.
Listen, I've got to tell you something. I respect what you've achieved at various parts in your life, but I really respect how you fought your way back after that situation. That to me speaks volumes. Volumes.
You know what, John? It was a very surreal image. Yes, of course, there were plenty of days I hated it. All the people I worked with were great. They're regular folks. I was a regular guy. I was a regular Long Island guy with a house and a wife, and I was a regular dude. My life just turned around because of my newspaper job. But it was very surreal when I'm at Best Buy selling TVs, and suddenly Rocky Balboa, which I'd already made, is now on DVD, and they're playing that movie on the televisions I'm selling. So people are seeing my face as I'm selling them their TV and walking it out to their trunks to put in their car for a $2 or $3 tip. That's surreal. That was it. I'm glad it happened to me. It was one of the best things that ever happened to me.
Listen, I understand more than you could ever realize. I was in a situation like that once in life. And in fact, when I saw The Wrestler with Mickey Rourke, and he's working behind the deli counter, and people are coming up and recognizing him as the wrestler, there again, it's a very humbling experience. It's a gut punch.
Yeah, it is. But it's not the end of the world. At the end of the day, your kids don't care where the sandwich comes from or where the soup came from. They don't care. Daddy's daddy, and that's that. And that's what saved me to keep going. That they don't care if their father's not on television. They just care that their father's home. That's it.
Yeah.
And that's what propelled me.
Yeah.
I'm there. There you go.
Yep. So you're doing a podcast now called Fame is a Bitch. And you are routinely breaking unbelievable news stories that very few other outlets have the guts to cover. You don't have to disclose where you get these stories from, but is it guts on your part, or is it just, how are you able to do what these major networks are too scared to do?
I just know a lot of people, and I know who to call. I know how to cut through the garbage. I've been at this for almost 30 years. And the podcast is the wild, wild west, kind of. We're kind of allowed to say things, and they haven't come for me yet. I'm not big enough like Joe Rogan, where everything I say is being watched. So I'm able to get away with things where other guys might not be. That could change in 6 months or a year. But in the meantime, when I know I have a tip on a story, I generally know where to go. And the older you get, the more you're in the business, people call me with tips. And I've learned to trust a lot of people who I consider sources from all walks of life. And I've been right. But I wish I could take credit for doing a lot of digging. I'm really the product of people who call me with information, and I'll check it with a source or two. But I've been good. The podcast has broke some big stories, and the audience has grown. And because of its popularity, I started Politics as a Bitch about 6 months ago, and that's become another show I do twice a week. Fame I do every day. Politics is twice a week. And because of this election we're going through and this insanity right now, that really just blew up in popularity too. So I've got a couple of different hats I wear now. And again, never thought I'd be in this game. 5 years ago, you couldn't have put a gun to my head to listen to a podcast. Now I find so many of them fascinating. It's my favorite form of entertainment to listen to a long form interview conversation with people instead of the typical, talk about your next movie and all that crap. I like where guys like Joe Rogan have taken this and Ben Shapiro have taken this and many others. So I'm happy to be in that crowd. I think they said there's 1 million podcasts out there and 2% of them make money. So I'm happy to be in the 2%. I'm nowhere near Joe Rogan's $100 million, but the fact that I can stay home, and I did a show before I spoke to you, and I got 2 more to do after I hang up with you. It's a blessing because I've been able to weather this ridiculous COVID storm and make money and provide on this new medium that's becoming powerful.
Listen, I used to be a producer for Oprah, for the Oprah Winfrey Show back in the day. And one of the things that Oprah and you and Rogan and some new up-and-comers like Candace Owen, one of the things all of you have in common is people instinctively recognize the truth resonating in your voice when they hear it. It's very, very discernible.
I think, that's something I appreciate that because that's one of the things that always grabbed me. I knew a lot of old timers in New York who actually, when they were younger, would give items to Walter Winchell. I mean, I know like some old timers who gave me tips and they said, your column rings of the truth. When you talk, you just have a believability factor because you don't seem phony, you don't seem fake. And that's also why I cut through in the journalism game, because I didn't come across as a reporter. I came across as a guy just shooting the crap. And then on television, I have a relaxed style and I shoot from the hip and I don't really watch what I say. And people, they like it. They respect that.
Listen, when a musical instrument is out of tune, people can immediately detect it. And when somebody is lying, they can detect it. They may not know what the truth is, but they hear the absence of the truth in the voice. And that's good. Across.
That's great. When I studied acting many years ago in New York, I had an great old teacher, Mira Rostova. And, it was the method, the whole thing. I had some great people in my class, but her thing was, when you hit a nail through wood with a hammer, you can still build a house with nails that don't quite go in right. They go in crooked. You got to bend them down. But we all know what it feels like to drive that nail into the wood perfectly when it's just smooth with the wood. And that's what acting is like. That's what life is like. If the nail isn't smooth to the wood, people pick up on it. They're never going to not see it. It doesn't come true. It doesn't come across as being true or authentic. And her basic tenement in that class was to just, if you know the emotion, you'll know how to drive that nail through the wood. You can't miss the nail if you know exactly what the emotion is. Sounds easy. It isn't always, because we drive a lot of nails through wood that are crooked. But if you really know what you want to state, then you shouldn't have any problem driving the nail through the wood.
Yeah, I was talking to actor Ron Perlman, who used to have a huge hit called Beauty and the Beast back in the day. And Ron said when that show ended, the phone did not ring for 10 years. And he said when his career reignited, he made a point of reaching out to people who were going through similar lows. Were there people in your life, celebrities, who stayed in touch with you and offered help from time to time when things were slow?
Yeah. I can't say monetary help, but I wasn't looking for that. I'm too proud for that. But there were people who called, and they're very surprising people. I don't even know where this comes from, but Arsenio Hall reached out to me, found me, and offered his, any kind of help. If you're lonely, do you want to talk? Because he knew what it was like to be at the tippy top of the game with the biggest talk show in town. And the next day, like you said, nobody returned his calls. Nobody, when he lost his talk show, returned his calls. Andrew Dice Clay got a hold of me through Instagram and was very friendly, because same thing happened to him. He was on top of the world. But back then he told some jokes that were sexist and maybe homophobic, and everybody dropped him. He was selling out Madison Square Garden. There was no bigger comic in the world. Career dead for years. He called me. Dennis Miller, for some reason, had a liking for me. So I've been blessed with people like that who picked the phone up and reached out for no rhyme or reason. They didn't want anything from me, but they just gave me the keep your chin up. You're going to be fine. We all go through these waves. And there are plenty of actors going through those waves right now, and regular people. It happens to everybody. One of the best pieces of advice I ever got when I was a columnist for the news, my editor-in-chief was my idol, Pete Hamill, the wonderful writer who just passed. And he ended up being the guy that let me go or allowed me to resign. We just didn't see eye to eye. He hated celebrity gossip. And so I leave, and then I get a book in the mail that he inscribed to me. It was a book about Sinatra, but he wrote inside to AJ, because we never know about a champion until he gets knocked down, and you're going to get up soon. It was very touching, because I had lost my job in New York, and he knew that killed me. And it just was just a remarkable moment that he would do that for me. So I did have a lot of people in my life that sent those kind of messages and that kind of charity, and it meant a lot.
So right now the podcasting business is on the ascendancy. Joe Rogan just licensed his podcast to Spotify for 9 figures. Where do you see the industry going, and where would you like to take your podcast over the next few years? What direction?
I don't know. I mean, I'd like a bigger audience. It's growing. I'm never satisfied with how much. I always want more. Right now, I'm very comfortable in that I can say what I want, and I'm in that middle ground where I'm not having people pick me apart, because this cancel culture nowadays is so frightening. You say one thing wrong, and your show is done. You're gone. So I'd like to be much bigger, but if I can keep making a living and support my family, I don't have to be super wealthy. I've got other endeavors. My poker show, High Stakes Poker, starting again next month. We did that for 5 years. It was #1 with Gabe Kaplan. That's going to start again. I've got other books coming out. I love to write and talk. So I'll go wherever the podcasting world takes me. Now that I've got an audience and an army of people who like what I say, I'm never going to lose them. So it's only going to get bigger. And I'm very curious to see where this goes, because there's no question podcasters will have television shows like some of them do now, but in a bigger way. It's the new talk show sort of thing. I think with COVID hitting, we all saw how boring talk shows are, how vapid they are. Nothing came across. Ratings were a disaster.
They're unwatchable.
They're unwatchable.
Yeah.
But if you sit down and watch Joe Rogan talk to a number of people, it can be fascinating, and it brings back the truth is the truth. A good conversation with people like Letterman used to do it, like he does it now on his Netflix show. That's what people want to see. Honesty. They don't want to be. They don't want to do karaoke in a car with us. They just want a conversation with real people. It fascinates them to see how people got so wealthy. They're fascinated by their fall from grace. Those are topics that'll never change. So if the podcast world gets bigger and more television shows and more visibility is offered, then I'm game, because I love marrying those two industries.
Do you have any interest in shooting your podcast on video or creating a TMZ style website to supplement your podcast?
I've talked about that. It's a lot of work. I'd have to have people help me. I couldn't do all that stuff in one day. And I don't know. I don't know if there's enough material for me every day. I like to talk about stuff every day, but I get nervous that it would get watered down. I like to do things my way. I had somebody contact me specifically about a website page, like the Wrap sort of thing, where I would be an accredited journalist and my stories would break on this particular page. It's probably something I should have started when I started the page. I might do that. I know that could be lucrative, but again, it also can get eyeballs on you that I don't trust the world right now. I don't trust the people who don't like you. And I've never been one of those people who the whole world is in love with. I've always been the person that, you love them or you hate them, but you watch them. So there are so many haters out there now. I'm a little frightened by what they can do on a whim if they don't like one thing you say. It could all come crumbling down. So I don't want to be too piggy right now. I'm sure I'll investigate those areas down the road. But for now, I love to do my show every day. I like to put on a couple of different hats, and life is good right now.
So right now, Los Angeles is getting a little apocalyptic. The crime, the homelessness, the insane new taxes they're attempting to levy on people.
Yeah.
It's off the charts crazy. Do you still enjoy living in LA?
No,
Do you feel safe in the city?
no, not at all. There's no benefit. I'm not a big beach goer, so I would miss the beach, I suppose. But my sister left New York, her and her husband and my nephew. They live in Chicago with their little babies. And I've been there a few times in the last year, not the city of Chicago, the suburbs. And I love it out there. It reminds me of Long Island in the 70s where I grew up. Everybody's friendly. There's a basketball court everywhere. Children are playing in the street. There's no homeless walking around. It's just idyllic. Out here, it's become disgusting. The only bright spot this morning was I went to get a bagel and I was shocked to see Ventura Boulevard, which is the main thoroughfare through the valley, hundreds of cars with Trump flags and honking the horn and Trump stickers. And I couldn't believe my eyes that this is Studio City, one of the most liberal bastions in all of California, where all the celebrities live and the people who light the sets and costume design live right there. For that parade to go through the streets was, talk about apocalyptic. Everything's changing. California might be red one day, which I think would be a good thing because where it is now is terrible. Terrible.
A few years ago, I had a meeting with William Shatner, and his office is in Studio City. So I got there a day ahead of time, and I had a hotel just off, just a few blocks away. And I'm laying there in the hotel room watching TV, and Ventura Boulevard is just outside the window. And I can hear two guys having a knife fight in the middle of Ventura Boulevard, screaming and yelling on both sides. And that was before the recent insanity. So I can just imagine what it's like now.
It's terrible. There's shootings. There's helicopters whipping around all night. Every city, Philly, New York, it's gross what's happening. I don't want to get too political, but I have a theory of why it's happening. And I think it'll stop if the right person wins the election. But then there's going to be more riots if Trump wins because people are just not going to be able to handle that. But I think in the long run, that's the best thing. But in the short run, it's going to be bad for a while.
So Joe Rogan is now in Texas. Comedian Joey Diaz is on the East Coast. Lots of celebrities are moving. If you were to move, where would you move to?
I would go to Illinois. It sounds crazy because who goes to Illinois? But that's where family is. That's where my sister is and her husband, my nephew, my two nieces, and his wife. And I find it beautiful. The food is great. The people are nice. You're 30 minutes out from the city if you want to go to Chicago. Not the bad part of town. I'd be there in a second. My one daughter is a junior in high school. My son is in 6th grade, so he's got some years left. I tend to not want to pull him out of school at this age, but when that's all said and done, maybe that'll be the move for us. I don't know, but I sure like it over there.
So before we wrap things up, is there anything you would like to promote?
Look, if anybody Fame is a Bitch is on Apple Podcasts Monday and Friday for free. I tend to get much more personal and much more deep into my stories. I save the real breaking stories for my Patreon shows, and that's patreon.com/fame is a bitch, also /politics is a bitch as well. Because, we didn't touch on this, but I knew Donald Trump for many years, 27, 28 years. We were friends. We were enemies. We got back to be friends again. I get a lot of information from people in his circle. So I've been able to break some stories on my show early on that helped it immediately. That's all I promote right now. High stakes poker will start again, probably in, I think, the spring. But in the meantime, it's all my podcasts. It's $5 a month. It's only a few cents a day, and you definitely get your money's worth because I'm not only on point with breaking stories, I'm very nostalgic about my life. People who like my show laugh and they cry. I bring a lot more to it than just a typical gossip reporter. I bring a lot more than that. I've got a million stories about what I've seen and done and gone through.
By the way, you mentioned OJ, or we mentioned OJ earlier. What was Did you ever meet him? What was your impression of him?
I met him before and I met him after. Before he was like meeting a hero of mine. I mean, I was actually at a party with him and I got to know the kind of guy he was. He liked to indulge himself in drugs, and he was, he was the star in every room he walked. And then the trial came, and I did all the reporting I did, and I was, obviously I felt he was guilty when I was a reporter. And when it ended, and after I'd been to the trial a number of times, he saw me there. When it ended, I was in Miami once, and he was there. We both were in the Mondrian Hotel, and the elevator was shutting, and I went, hold it, hold it, hold it, and it opened again, and it was OJ. And I said, oh, God, I'm going to be in the elevator with OJ after all the crap I've said about this guy. And he just said, he shook my hand and said, hey, man, you were just doing your job. I said, oh, I appreciate that, man. I really do. I said, I hope things are okay for you. He said, I'm going to the penthouse. Things are fine with me. And I said, wow, that's OJ for sure.
Well, it has been a real pleasure having you on the John Ark Show. I want to congratulate you on all your success. And I feel that the best is yet to come for you. I really do. And you are always welcome back on the show, AJ.
Hey, thanks, John. Anytime you want me, hopefully there'll be something else to promote, bigger stories to tell. So feel free to call me anytime.
Thank you very much, AJ.